Good afternoon and welcome to the final session in our Healing School Communities Community of Practice. My name is Ingrid Padgett and I'm a Communications and Program Strategist with the New England MHTTC. Can you go to the next slide? As you're joining our virtual space, particularly if you joined prior sessions, tell us in the chat, what's resonating with you around this work? Are you feeling empowered, joyful, connected? Are you thinking of ways to integrate and apply what you've learned? Feeling like you have the confidence and the resources to identify and interrupt racial violence and create healing spaces and opportunities for healing? Are you considering ways to nurture and elevate youth voice and power as teachers, therapists, school partners, and school leaders? If you can add those things to the chat as I kind of walk you through our tech logistics, that'd be great. Next slide. Microphones will be muted during today's presentation at designated times. For example, during our Q&A, you can use the raise your hand feature to request an open mic. When speaking, be sure to eliminate background noise. We're pleased to offer the option of closed captioning for this webinar. You can select this option and change transcription settings by clicking the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you have a link to resources you'd like to share or questions for the group, feel free to add those to the chat box as well. We've made every attempt to make today's presentation secure. If we need to end the presentation unexpectedly, we will follow up with you using the registration you used via email. If you have audio or technical issues during the session, please let us know via the chat. We also want to hear what you think about today's event, so please take a moment at the end of today's session to complete a brief survey. And remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at MHTTC Network, on Instagram at Healing School Communities, and please also visit our website at www.mhttc.org to find your regional center and where you can access more resources and training, all free of cost. Next slide. Our funding comes from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The views and opinions expressed in today's session are those of the presenters and moderators, not SAMHSA. The Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network uses person-centered, affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. During this session, please ensure that whenever you're contributing to our discussion, that you also use language that is affirming, respectful, and strengths-based. The MHTTC network includes 10 regional centers, a National American Indian and Alaska Native Center, a National Hispanic and Latino Center, and a network coordinating office. Please visit our website to learn more about the MHTTC network. Our goal with this series has been to build a network of support among school communities that strengthens our capacity to lead in challenging racial violence while forging school cultures and climates of healing and wellness. On that note, let us know via the chat. We've kind of like a chat waterfall. Let us know who you are and where you're from, what role you play in supporting mental health. Today's session is focused on ways to integrate and apply what we've learned in the series to create healing spaces and opportunities for healing in school communities. As this is our culminating event in our series, let's recall some of the hopes and needs shared by participants. On the next slide, you'll see things, a beautiful artwork, but also some quotes from our members or our participants, including hoping to learn how to navigate the work of abolition while working inside the systems that cause harm. Looking for ways to center students' needs and realities, bringing these discussions to our communities and having these conversations with families. Folks were excited that we were shining a light on the disparities that exist in education for BIPOC youth and giving energy to this kind of conversation. Again, via the chat, as we're moving forward today, I'd like us all to kind of pause and reflect on what it's meant for you, your healing journey, to be a part of this series, to be a part of this learning community. Take a moment and think about this question and add a comment about your journey to the chat perhaps as I introduce our featured speaker, Brandon Santiago. Brandon is a San Francisco-raised Puerto Rican artist, an innovative cultural strategist and community organizer, and a creative social impact leader who's traveled the world as an educator, performer, and speaker. He's also taught at universities such as Stanford and the University of San Francisco. Brandon has been a catalyst for transformative work within communities and organizations around the globe. Today, he's a creative council member of the Peace Studios, lead producer for the Center for Cultural Power, and proudly serves as the executive director for the Ghetto Film School in Los Angeles. And now it's my pleasure to turn the session over to Brandon.
Peace, everyone. Thank you so much, Ingrid. I appreciate that. Really excited to be with you all today. I got a chance to experience the first session and took so much away. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. We're going to start with a quick settle in. I'm going to show some videos of some student work and we're going to have a bit of a conversation. But if you wouldn't mind taking a moment, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes for a second. We're going to take a couple of deep breaths in. Feel free to follow along with me. We're going to go 4 in, hold for 4, and then 4 out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then out for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do that one more time. In 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then out for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. While you have your eyes closed, please feel free to continue to breathe. But I want you to think of 2 things. The first thing is I want you to think of someone that you're bringing into space today. Could be a student or a family member or a colleague, someone who's not able to join us, but you're carrying their spirit with you today. If you wouldn't mind throwing that person's name in the chat, I just love to invoke them, bring them into space with us. And then the second thing I would love for you to think about is a word that you'd like to focus on today. That can be joy, it can be stillness, it can be calm. Think of that word, and if you wouldn't mind throwing that in the chat as well. Feel free to go ahead and open your eyes. I see Samuel, Celestino. Thank you so much for sharing. Rest is someone's word. Really appreciate that. Jalen, awesome, awesome. So again, Brandon Santiago, really excited to be here. I'm gonna give a quick background on who I am and what I do, and then I'm gonna share some beautiful work from my students. So born and raised in San Francisco, I think some of the things I share with often is I was a high school dropout 2 times. So I dropped out as a 10th grader and I dropped out again as a senior. And people ask me like, what was the reason why? What was the reason you made that move from being a student to saying, I don't want to go to school? And I always say the thing that I felt the most was the feeling of being unsafe in a classroom. Whether it was unsafe to share, I was the type of person, or even if I had the answer right, I didn't raise my hand. I always say like I was okay with speaking in public. I was definitely loud on the back of the bus, but I was absolutely not loud in classrooms. I didn't know how to do any public speaking. But that feeling of being unsafe, whether it was, again, with the teacher, with other students, or just a feeling of unsafety sort of drove me to step away from class. And so as an educator, one of the things I try and create as much as possible is a safer space, a braver space for students to come and participate. And I've done that through writing, critical literacy, spoken word. Currently, I'm at an organization called the Ghetto Film School, and we use film and screenplays as a medium. But there's a couple of things I love to talk about in that sense. The first one is, I know you all, if you can go to the second slide. One of the things I say is that any space that I'm in, it's never about teaching writing. You can press it one more time and the next part will pop up. It's always about facilitating a space in which writing happens in the service of healing. And there's a big difference. I know that sometimes folks will ask me, what's the best way to create a space where students can write? And I always say the best way is to make sure that those students feel safe, heard, and seen to share their story. And that's the most important thing. Again, the writing happens as a byproduct of students feeling safe and students feeling like they can share their story with students. If you want to go to the next slide, the way we do that is by creating a culture. That culture is critical. You can see the R in parentheses because we believe that there is no such thing as an actual safe space at all times for everyone. And so the goal is to always create a safer space, always making sure that as much as possible, even if it's every session, how can we create an environment that was safer than the one Previously, we do that by creating a democratic community, whether that's aligning chairs or making sure that everyone can see each other, invoking bravery, modeling that bravery as an educator and as a student, and making sure that everyone feels safe enough to participate and share their story. You can go to the next slide. There's a couple of tenets that I've picked up from organizations I've worked in over the past few years. And these tenets, if you want to press all three, and then all of them can pop up. These are some of the things that anytime I'm in a space, I'm always thinking about. And the first one is life is primary text. And what that means is that when I step into a space, whether I'm facilitating for that first moment, or if I'm doing a residency or teaching there all year, the first thing I say is that the students' lives are the primary text. And so before I introduce any outside media, before I bring in additional text, the first thing I want to do is say, your story is the most important thing we're going to talk about. And so we ask students to always first share from their life as the primary text that we're going to be reading from. The second one is always urgency, making sure that the students feel safe to share what's important to them. I don't ever want to create a space where I'm dictating what they think I want to hear, but creating that space where students know that this is your moment to share exactly what's on your mind and what's most important. The next one is something, I got this from an organization called You Speaks I worked at for years. It's called First Sound, and it's one of my favorite sort of tenets. And first sound is a moment that a student hears their voice for the first time. And I can recall my first sound. I remember being at a spoken word event. It was an open mic. I got on the mic for the first time. In the middle of my poem, it was a bad poem about a breakup I was just having. But in the middle of the poem, and I realized I was in front of this audience sharing my story. And that was sort of a moment that I had a first sound moment. It was my voice and me hearing and being introduced to my voice for the first time. And then, of course, always active listening, being as present as possible. Again, my background is in spoken word and critical literacy arts, but currently I'm working at an amazing organization called the Ghetto Film School. And what we do is we take students to a 3-year program to teach them the ins and outs of filmmaking. And these students create phenomenal films year after year. But we've noticed a couple of things. The first thing is that as students feel safer, films become a little bit more personal. A lot of times when students first come in, they're sharing things that they've seen. They'll write a script that is very similar to a script you've seen in movies or on Netflix. But as students become more and more safe or feel more and more safe inside the classroom, the films become more and more personal. So I'm going to share with you 3 different films. The great thing is there's sort of a cascade of how we do an evolution of their voice. And so the first films are completely non-dialogue. And so you're going to see 3 non-dialogue films from students who wrote. The last film has a little bit of dialogue in it. And so we ask students in their second year to start to put a little bit of dialogue in their films. But most of the time for the first couple of years, students are creating films in which they're telling a story with nothing but pictures or visually. So we can start, if we want to kick off the first film, that would be amazing. This is one of my favorite films. It's definitely has some levity in it, and it's from now currently a senior in our program at the Ghetto Film School. So please watch and enjoy. Much, and you can see there's a ton of subtext in that film, and that was a student in their first year at GFS, and so I'm going to show you a student now in their second year, and then the last film will be a student in their third year. But again, as students feel safer and as they feel more comfortable, you're going to notice the film start to feel a little more personal. So as you can see, this was a collaboration between the Huntington Museum, and students were asked to take a portrait and reimagine that portrait in a short film. And so these are the portraits that those students reimagined in the film. Yeah, the cool thing about this too is this is the first time that students were able to actually use film. So they were shooting on Bolex cameras with 10 millimeter. So those are some of my favorite films. Sarah Jean Williams is actually the director of this last film is also one of my favorites. and you're going to notice the trajectory of this is a student in their last year, how personal this film is, and this is a film that definitely speaks to me. I can't wait for you to see it. The last one.
Inés, tu abuelo no se siente bien. Tú me recuerdas mucho a él. Era bien trabajador. Tal vez quieres ir a verlo. Yo sé que estás ocupada, que te gradúas en unos días. Yo ya sabía que se iba a ir. Era terco. Pero se enfadó de la ciudad. Se enamoró de los paisajes de su rancho. Los lindos campos, el pasto verdecito. Yo sé que no lo conoces bien, pero los dos son igualitos.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just look real quick, if you notice just the use of color and framing in that, it's just a beautiful film. And again, as students progress, their films definitely become more and more personal. So I'll end on a quote, if you wouldn't mind sharing the last slide. And this quote is something that I come back to often. It's by Zaretta Hammond, who's an educator and teacher. A key of being culturally responsive as a teacher is recognizing that you are a critical linchpin in helping students navigate both the content and the classroom community. And for me, that just speaks to the idea that I'm never teaching a subject. I'm always engaging with students. And no matter what is on the whiteboard or what they have on their desk, my job is to help them navigate the world as well as the classroom and the content. So thank you so much. Appreciate you all watching the films. Yeah, if you want any more information, please feel free to reach out. I'll pass it back to you all.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing such powerful art and creativity from your students. It's very moving to see what they've created, what you've all created together. I'm Martha Staley. I'm part of the New England MHTTC. And I'm just so honored to be with you all today during this culminating session. Now we are going to, sorry, sorry, my slides were stuck. We're going to begin moving into breakout groups. And so it's my pleasure to reacquaint you with all of the amazing faculty members that we've had throughout this very powerful series, who are going to be leading our mini workshops and opportunities for discussion. So what's going to happen is that with this activity, faculty members are going to take turns joining you in your breakout rooms. So you will remain in your breakout rooms for the entire time that we're together, and faculty will move every 10 minutes or so in between the rooms and lead you through activities or discussion or ways of thinking about how to enact some of the things that we've been discussing during this series in your own practice. So I want to welcome back our wonderful faculty members. We're going to start with Dr. Tiffany Marie, who led our session on moving beyond schooling towards models of education and youth protection, and Dr. Kenjis Watson, who led our discussion around interrupting and examining the impacts of oppression and resistance on student wellness. So Tiffany and Kenjis will be teaming to support a breakout group today. We have Jerica Coffey, who offered an amazingly powerful session in our series around culturally sustaining and healing-centered pedagogy. We have today's wonderful speaker, Brandon Santiago. Noor Jones-Bay, who shared her wisdom around and strategies for cultivating joy and healing through pedagogy and practice. And last but not least, our speaker from last week, Dr. Patrick Camagnon, who led our session on moving from coping to hoping, teaching students to thrive through social trauma. So our tech manager is going to be moving you into breakout groups now. We're going to return to the full group for further discussion and sharing out some of the learnings and takeaways from your time in these terrific groups. So again, you will be invited to join a group and you will stay with that group for this part of our session together. And then we hope that you will rejoin the larger group after that to share with us and reflect on some of the work we've done together. Well, thank you everyone for taking that time to be in discussion with our terrific faculty members. Welcome back to the larger group. We just have a couple of minutes before we end. Oh, and I love Oriana's comment in the chat about feeling so full, and that was a beautiful experience. So does anybody have any other reflections or things that they'd like to share in just the couple of minutes that we have? Something that resonated for you, something that came up, something that that you got from this amazing series of discussions throughout the last several weeks. You can put it into the chat or feel free to raise your hand or unmute. I love that. Looking forward to these each week. What will I do next Tuesday? I feel the same way. Ariana too. It's just been a wonderful experience to be part of this community, like such a an unusual community building experience, even through Zoom, feeling connected to all of you. That the conversations around play and joy were transformative, a sense of well-being and comfort. Like that's wonderful. That is what we hoped for when thinking of this series. Wanting to meet back here next week, same time and place. I don't know, Amy, you might find a lot of us here with you, wanting to be part of this, continue to be part of this community. Well, please feel free to keep sharing in the chat. I mean, it's wonderful to see all of your comments. And as we wrap up, I'm going to pass it back to my terrific colleague, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Martha. It's my pleasure to also extend thanks to all members of our faculty, staff team, and of course to the participants who joined us for one, a few, or all sessions in this series. I'd like to close out with a quote from Ella Barker, a brilliant African-American hero of the civil rights freedom movement. She inspired and guided emerging leaders, and I'm hoping we can extend her legacy by creating solutions. So the quote is, "We not only must remember where we have been, but we must also understand where we have been." Thank you for joining us, for trusting us, for building with us, for creating this community. Again, our funding comes from SAMHSA, which requires us to evaluate our services. The survey is being added to our chat. We appreciate your honest, anonymous feedback, which will provide information to SAMHSA and assist us in planning future meetings and program. Your feedback counts. So thank you again, everyone. We hope that you stay connected to the MHTTC network.